Hi, Elwood City Limits listeners. It's me, Will Young, here to give you a bit of an introduction to today's special ECL Presents. Yeah, so this one actually premiered on our Patreon a couple of weeks ago, so all of our patrons got to hear it first. And it's an episode that I'm very proud that a couple of you asked that we do. It is concerning the digital shorts that Arthur and the Arthur team have made in 2020. That includes their thoughts, Arthur's thoughts, quote unquote, can't see me doing the quotes, on coronavirus, on the graduating class of 2020, and finally on racism, which I'm sure all of you have seen. If you haven't, they're pretty easy to get a hold of on YouTube or on PBS Kids' or on Arthur's social media. So I will be getting into that with YouTubers Cash and Wacky Deli. Very happy to have met them and to kind of get their opinions on this. It's a big issue. But before we do all that, there's just a couple things. I wanted to make sure to answer a couple of emails at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com because it's going to be, I'll tell you all about our plans for the next couple of weeks before we jump back into the mailbag. So let's go over here. First off, got an anonymous one about a fan art idea, and I wanted to put this out to the community if anybody wants to go with this idea. I'm not a fan artist myself, so I won't be taking this from you. The anonymous person suggests somebody needs to make fan art of something involving Bionic Bunny and Black Panther to honor Chadwick Boseman, like Bionic Bunny doing the Wakanda Forever salute, or Dark Bunny, as a matter of fact. Whatever. Anyway, there's an idea for you as artists. It was incredibly sad what happened to Chadwick Boseman. I'll remember it for a long time because it was the night before my birthday. But of course, I'll also remember because it's incredibly sad, and he was a really, really great talent, and I can't wait to discover more of his movies and honor the actor that he was. So yeah, that was a really sad one. Let's go now to Riley Stevens. 22-year-old Arthur super fan. When I found your podcast, I was a little bit angry that you guys thought of the idea of an Arthur podcast before I did, and became a patron before I listened to a single episode out of respect for the great idea. Wow, that's awesome. Thanks, Riley. I've always felt kind of weird for continuing to love Arthur after elementary school, but there is something about it that is just so good, and I am glad that other people understand. I am now on my way to becoming an educator and can appreciate it even more for its educational value. The reason I want to reach out is because in the last episode, during Flaw and Order, Lucas mentioned how he confused Mrs. Persky with the woman that Arthur got Pal from, Mrs. Wood. The reason for that confusion was that Mrs. Wood's dog, who is Pal's mother, is named Perky. You know what? That would probably do it, Riley. Thank you for helping to clear that up. And we have one more here from Lawrence, who I had quite a nice correspondence from. Lawrence discovered the show last month and has been burning through the back catalog. He's a fellow Canadian, Torontonian, originally from Edmonton. YTV and Canadian Things are such amazing callbacks. I grew up watching Arthur, and I was exactly the same age as him when the show started, so I related very much to him. Wearing glasses, bookworm, the constant anxiety of messing up relationships. I'd watch random clips on YouTube once in a while and still quote the show regularly. Sadly, not many people get the references. Yeah, trust me, I know. But I find myself rewatching the episodes as you recap them. It's been fun seeing how much of the show I do remember. I mentioned the show and your podcast to friends and colleagues as a quarantine self-care routine and thought people wouldn't get it like the Love Ducks, but surprisingly, it's been getting positive responses all around. Well, thank you very much for sharing. And Lawrence continues here. We kind of connected on the fact that we're both Reboot fans of the 90s CGI show Reboot. I found excited to hear you're also a Reboot fan, how close you were to doing a Reboot podcast. That's a fun fact that I'll share with you right now, is that one of the shows that I was considering doing a podcast about 4 years ago was Reboot, because I've seen that show back to front, and I could talk about it all day. I found a couple of Reboot podcasts out there, but haven't listened to them yet. See, that's the thing. I'm glad I cornered the market on Arthur, because I feel like Reboot, it's short enough, and it's got a big enough fan community that I can imagine there being Reboot podcasts already. Maybe something to consider after you wrap up for the kids. Well, we've got a lot of options there, don't you worry. I have a couple thoughts on Arthur changes gears. I got protective of my gaming consoles when I first got them, including the Switch, and would worry about damaging the joysticks or scratching the screen. It's now a well-worn machine thanks to playing Smash and Tetris 99, and I don't regret it a single bit. On the other hand, I've indulged in buying nice stationery that remains wrapped and never used. This is my version of having fine china. Interesting. Now, the thing about the Switches is that right now, my wife and I have serious Switch drift. So we're going to have to send it in, and it's a whole hassle. I really, really don't like this, so I'm, not too happy about it. But otherwise, I do generally try to treat things well. Hey, this is the first podcast content I'm making on my new laptop, so I'm going to treat this with kid gloves for as long as I can. Well, Lawrence, it was very nice to hear from you, and Riley and Anonymous, you as well. Thank you so much for your emails, elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. So a couple other things I want to address. I promise we're getting to the episode very soon. So first of all, just our schedule in the next couple of weeks. So next week we are going back to Patreon for another Patreon bonus episode of For the Kids. We're talking about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So I'm currently doing some research on it. The thing is that there's already so many great documentaries and there's so much great content out there about Mr. Rogers. It's hard to kind of parse it through. So I feel like this episode will be maybe a bit lighter on research. Of course, touching on the important points, but I think what's important is that we actually talk about the show itself. I think that's something that gets glossed over a little bit of what a typical episode was like, and revisiting it for ourselves. So we'll give that a try. And that's going to be Patreon exclusive next week. The week after that, we will be back in full swing with Elwood City Limits with Unfinished and DW Bossy Boots. So we will be back very soon. And of course, something that has come to light this week. It is September the 4th, Friday, September 4th, that I'm recording this. And if you follow us on Twitter, then you may have seen that there has been some super sleuths out there in the Arthur community have found the episode listings for the upcoming seasons 24 and 25. Season 25 including what looks to be both the final Arthur special and the final Arthur episode. So this is it. This has been something that I've been I haven't wanted to comment on because I felt like it wasn't my thing to announce. We kind of straddle the line here between, we're a fan podcast, but I also want to be respectful of the creators, and I didn't want to get out in front of them before they can have the chance to say to the audience that Arthur's ending. But if you haven't heard it, that's the idea. It's not immediately, but within the next couple of years, it looks like we're gonna have to say goodbye to Arthur. I think we're gonna talk about this in a couple of weeks. I want to talk about this with Lucas. I want to get his reaction, so I'll kind of save mine for right now. But we will be discussing it a little bit more in depth, and it is a big deal. See, it would be the end of an era, but I'm excited to see what this means and what it means for us. So I'd say don't worry too much about it. Last thing is that I want to acknowledge our patrons who got to listen to this first, and they include such lovely people as Mary Archambault, Alistair, Nicholas DeMarco, Valeria, Lawrence, Mason Bishop, Daniel Updegraff, Jolo Flo, Ursula Cat, Michelle Sprzinski, Owen, Lee Goldson, Lion Dog ZXA, EJ Acra, Christine Lescoti, Greg Agai, Yoshi, Lily W, Melissa Avalez, Andrew Power, Matt, Pretty Cool Stairs, Marlo Stanfield, Rachel Pearson, Michaela Gibson, Kristen, Sierra S, Kat, Aaron DeFilippo, William, Shayna Bennett, Kaylin Krogall, Kevin Noon, Jake Bailey, Macy Ball, Riley Stevens, Joe Sue, Christine Wong, Stella, Froppy, Emily K, Shander LaFave Bowden, John Griswold, Teresa, Dan Mike Dawson Silva, Light Relentless, Ian Collis, John DeLong, and Leanne S. Thanks, everybody, and some more content coming your way. And, of course, it is very easy to join our Patreon. Won't have the same ad break as we normally do, so I'll just say patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits. Follow us on social media. Send us an email, and it's nice to get back in the swing of things. Just wanted to take a little break after my 30th birthday. So, Thanks for indulging me here. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to myself for this special ECL Presents on the 2020 Arthur Digital Shorts.
And now, a message from Arthur.
It's another unique setup here on Elwood City Limits and another edition of ECL Presents, because today we're going all the way into the future. Currently on the Elwood City Limits timeline, we're somewhere around 2006, but now we're going to go all the way into 2020 because it turns out Arthur has some really important things to say, and in a digital way. So I am Will Young, and welcome to this episode of ECL Presents. We're going to be talking about 3 videos that Arthur's team have put out in the last year to deal with some pretty big issues that have been happening. And I thought that there would be no better guests to have on than, 2 gentlemen who have made a great YouTube video talking about one of these, and I think are also big Arthur fans in their own right. I'm excited to talk to them about it and about their own Arthur fandom. So first of all, I was going to say from the world of YouTube, but I guess both of you guys are. I will introduce first Wacky Deli.
Hey, how's it going there?
Hey, man, it's good to hear from you. And of course, you recently made an Arthur video that really resonated a lot with me, and you had a guest on that video, and his name is Cash. Hey, Cash.
Hello.
So thanks a lot for coming on the show, guys. I think this is something that I'm really glad we have the opportunity to talk about while it's still relatively recent. But before we get into some of these videos, I'm curious to know your own experience with Arthur, and when did you start watching it? What are your feelings on the show, and that sort of thing. So we'll start with Deli. Deli, when did you start watching Arthur?
I started watching it at a pretty young age. I think the first real memories I had with it was watching old VHSs that were borrowed from the library, and it still had the Random House branding on it, and it was like season 1 or 2. It was just really old, and I've always had access to cable, but I've also watched a lot of PBS shows in my time, so I just would watch it intermittently throughout childhood, and every once in a while I still check up on it, and it's still a really interesting series. I know it's probably ending in a few seasons, but it's still interesting to look back on every once in a while.
For sure, absolutely. And Cash, I'd like to know about your story with Arthur as well.
Okay. Well, like Deli, I was first exposed to it through childhood, of course, first on PBS. I think I've never really been in like a period in my life, like most of my life, honestly, like without it, because most of my viewing experience of just like watching PBS on a regular basis was also because my brother, who had special needs. We really bonded over that. So that was like of all the PBS shows, that was our favorite. So over the years, we just like really bonded over that, like as like the seasons came, and even though he's still even though he's not currently like living here, like anytime I want to think of him, I can just like pop on an episode and we can still sing songs like whenever I'm able to communicate with him via Zoom. So, I guess in a sense, Arthur still helps me to connect with like my inner child and just the good memories, and I still appreciate it for that.
So it sounds like you have a really personal connection to it as well as being just a show that you like to revisit.
Yes.
And not to say that you necessarily don't, Deli, but, sometimes people can come at it from different ways. And I know, of course, you guys are huge cartoon fans in your own right. If you check out both of your YouTube channels, I mean, there's some awesome videos on there. And so cartoons are, much like myself, kind of a way of life for you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's why I figured you were kind of the best equipped, or one of the best equipped, to talk to me about this. So this year on Arthur's YouTube/social media, they've come out with 3 different videos that have been very, very timely. And I wanted to kind of unpack that because we've had a lot of listeners who have been wondering about kind of our feelings on these videos. Now, some of these, of course, range in topics from seriousness, so we'll kind of start with the lightest one here. And I guess when I was pitching this to you guys, I was thinking that I think I must have dreamed this. I thought of a video where Arthur and Buster were having a discussion about COVID-19 over a webcam, but then I tried looking for it, and I could not find it anywhere. What I did find is the Wash Your Hands song. And it's, well, I mean, I kind of don't have a lot to say about it. It's where we can start, though. It's in the new style of Arthur animation, and it's just taking repurposed clips from the show. And it's, remember back a few months ago when when the big thing about quarantine and COVID was wash your hands?
Yeah.
Right.
And we weren't even into the mask part of things yet. So it was all just wash your hands and 20 seconds and all this kind of thing. So this was a real basic kind of way for kids to get into the idea of being, I still feel like, I don't know about you guys, but my hands would get super dry, like washing them like 5 times a day.
Yeah. I can definitely relate.
Was there anything about this particular one that jumped out to you? And it's okay if there isn't, because this is just kind of the way in.
I didn't find anything particularly striking about it. It's just kind of been mixed into the haze of like children's entertainment trying to grapple with the seriousness of the pandemic while also just trying to keep everybody in check. And I think it just kind of falls in line with the rest. It's not particularly remarkable, but I think that's what makes it good. It's just solid information, and that's all that really needed to be conveyed.
Mm-hmm.
No, I definitely agree. When I first saw this, like, I will admit, I do have like more of a connection to the older seasons, not necessarily to say the 90s episodes, more like the more traditionally drawn ones. So while I have seen some of the more modern episodes, I'm still not completely familiar with it. So I guess it's kind of like showed me that there was definitely like a change, so to say. But still, it's still a great way, just for kids to just, still in a more optimistic way, just to have everyone to know as to what to do. So I figure, it's fine. I can't really harp on it. I'm sure if I were still in the intended demographic, I'd probably be singing that song too. So it's perfectly fine.
And speaking of kind of breaking this down to a level of kids, because you're right, Deli, there have been a lot of different properties that have been kind of trying to get the message out, it seems, for the past few months about quarantine. And I think the one that kind of went a little bit more of a serious bend was about, I think this was a couple of months ago in June. Arthur Celebrates the Class of 2020 is the name of the video, and it is Arthur over quote-unquote webcam. Andy W. doing a graduation speech for everybody. This when this was uploaded, it kind of took me by surprise, because I genuinely didn't expect the Arthur animators and voice actors to even do something like this. But for me, I really liked it, and especially watching it now, it is still kind of stuck in that, like, we can do this together, and that kind of feeling about quarantine, which I think has changed in the last couple of months, but it is still very aspirational in the best way, at least I feel.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's when I look at all the commencement addresses that have been made for this year, they're definitely tailored towards, older kids, people going right into college. Adult Swim, for example, they had a really great commencement series, and I think they started off with like Eric Andre, and it's just been a riot. But there hasn't been much tailored towards that younger set that might be going into middle school or maybe even high school or elementary. So I think it was important that the Arthur team decided to step in and create that kind of resource. And since Arthur is multi-generational, it doesn't even have to like apply to like a little kid. It can be somebody that's going to a master's program, and they can get something out of it, So it's just really, it's nice that they're using that platform, that space to try to create a little more calm within the storm.
And as for me, like I completely agree because, quite hilariously, I ended up missing my associate's graduation because it
Oh
was
man.
held via Zoom. But when I was able to see this, you know, even though like because it went completely under my radar personally, uh, like I had been aware of like some of the others, like the Adult Swim one that Deli had mentioned, but I didn't know that the Arthur channel did this. But it really resonated with me, and I really like I really commend how they're approaching this because it wasn't it wasn't in a way of like of course they softened it for like the younger kids that are inevitably going to be watching this, but it wasn't in such a way that felt artificial or like annoying, ignoring I should say, how things have changed, but still having a sense of optimism that I feel was really warranted, and I really feel like it could warm anyone's heart. I just really appreciate that.
I did too, and that was, I got kind of a tear in my eye when I watched it the first time. I was just like, I mean, that was the kind of content that we were looking for, something very positive, and leave it to. I forget which one of you said it, but multi-generational. I think that's a great way to look at Arthur, is the fact that it doesn't belong to just today's kids or yesterday's kids like me or my co-host Lucas. It belongs to everybody, and it can speak to so many different types of people who either have nostalgia from the past or watch it as it is today, either as a kid or as a young adult. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I guess that kind of does lead us into the big one, the one that people really wanted us to talk about. And I'm very glad to have found you two because, I mean, geez, where do I start? So, I'll tell you this. When I was turned onto your video there, Deli, Arthur condemned racism and Twitter had thoughts, which I think is a very good video that you and Cash both did, and I would recommend everybody go to YouTube and check it out. I felt very vindicated because sometimes when you take a look at the fact that people are reacting to the video, the title is Arthur and Racism, Talk, Listen, and Act. This is the third kind of viral video that Arthur put out through its social media. And the matter of the video is a three-way video call between Arthur, Buster, and Mrs. McGrady talking about what kids Arthur's age, around that age range, and who do watch Arthur, can do about racism, especially in the context of the fact that the characters in Arthur are all children, so they're not necessarily being expected to end racism themselves, but there are things they can do that start with them. And, I look at that and I think, what a nice, almost innocuous message, an important one, but one that I think, especially in the climate that we're in this year, wouldn't ruffle a lot of feathers, but it turns out that it did. So Deli, I mean, I don't want to step on any points or have you step on any of your own points that you made in the video, but one of the big things was the reaction to it, and especially the YouTube dislikes. So I wanted to kind of gauge how you feel about the short and what the reaction kind of made you feel, and you as well, Cash.
Oh man. It's
loaded. It's loaded.
Oh man, I've been thinking about it all week. It's a. Let me quote the Arthur theme song, right? It's a simple message, and it comes from the heart, and it is. Mm-hmm. It's such like it should be such a milquetoast thing that it shouldn't even register. And I think part of it is because, Cash and I are black. This stuff does relate to us quite directly. And to me, like, the way that when I posted the abridged version of that on Twitter, it wasn't even like, Arthur is a martyr of social justice and they're the real advocates of this generation. No, it was just like, well, the racism bad? I approve. That's pretty cool. And oh, man. I can't even look at that tweet anymore.
I bet, man, and like, holy crap, that thing took off, and like, I saw it on not just the ECL Twitter, but on like my my Normo Twitter account, and I'm like, wow, yeah. And I was like, great, this is being passed around. People who aren't just super fans of the show are latching onto it, which is true from both sides, though.
Yeah, it got too far, man. We gotta cancel this tweet. It's gotten too far. I saw the blue check marks out there. Liking it.
Oh my god, I can only imagine the response that you've gotten from doing that tweet. In terms of the replies, have you gotten any like nasty DMs or anything like that?
Oh no, I haven't. Luckily, I haven't gotten that. I keep my DMs. I was like, maybe I should close this for a few days, but I haven't gotten anything crazy. So, you know, I mean, you know, and the fact that there wasn't anything really. There was more vitriol aimed at like the cartoon aardvark than there was at me, who was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. Like, you know, there were a few snarky like quote retweets, but other than that, like, it's just people like arguing in the replies, and it's a circus, and I don't want to look at it. But it's like, it's also kind of entertaining. Like, you know, the fact that people do feel the need to like, you know, debate about this is important, because you are keeping the discussion going, even if like someone disagrees and like 70 people tell you no, you're wrong. That's really stupid. But it still does contribute to the conversation. I've gotten just the tiniest fraction of that attention on the video, but the comment section is even worse, and I don't even want to look at it. I can't. You know, I can look back at the tweet. I can't look at the comment section.
Well, and I had somebody in our ECL Discord being like, "Huh, it's too bad you can't see the comments." And I'm like, "No, that's great." Like the dislikes are saying everything, like, and you don't need to strain your brain, unfortunately, to know what those comments are full of. Like I have like an Arthur Google alert, and I'm getting like these ultra right-wing newsletters being like, Arthur with anti-white propaganda, like headlines, and it's just so tiring. Cash, I'd love to know your reaction when the video was posted, and to that kind of initial surge as well.
Well, it's kind of been interesting for me. It's actually funny because initially I was just scrolling some forums, and I wasn't the one that originally brought the video to Dell's attention at first, but because I knew there were like one person that would really gel with me on this, it would be Deli. But I guess it's just that I just feel like a miasma of like a lot of this stuff, because like these shows, like Arthur in of itself, touching on more serious topics, that's nothing new. There are like many episodes that just focus on just like issues or different perspectives in life that, really help add something to the conversation or teach people, kids or adults, something that they probably haven't known before. So, and going beyond that is not, we're in the 2020s, children's media addressing some of these topics like more head on isn't unheard of either. So just to have like such an adverse reaction to this, where it's literally just racism bad, kind of really let me down. Especially how people, by the way, like never check Twitter. It's like, me like seeing a lot of people say that, addressing this at all is just leftist propaganda, or just like, like putting politics in kids shows is bad, even if I agree with them. And, it's greatly ignorant, and I don't know. Again, it's just a simple message that was appropriate for the climate, and I didn't think anyone could disagree with it, but people are, and despite them having nothing intelligent to say, it's not like we can really stop that discussion, no matter how much I obviously don't approve of it.
I think something.
Can I just add on to that,
of course,
too? Because like it's not only like there was extreme negative reaction to it. It's just there was there was a lot of extremism on both sides because, okay, like, the whole premise of the tweet, I guess, would be the extreme wording of it, right? It's not only, it's like racism bad, but I sent it, you know, in a more creative way. So there were a lot of black people that were like, "Oh my God, Arthur is a king. We stand. He's been a light-skinned hero all the time." And I've never heard that ever outside of like this tweet. Like, this is the first time I'm hearing people address him as black, and I think that's great. There were a lot of people that were moved by it. A lot of people that, you know, showed this to their kids and they embraced it, and that's really cool. But then, of course, there was also like a lot of more vitriolic or snarky kind of questioning tones like Cash it. And not all of them were really like unreasonable. Like, a lot of them were inherently racist or ignorant, but a lot of them were just like, this is kind of, I don't like how they did this. I don't like, this feels a little bit like propaganda to me. You know what? I mentioned this in the video too, because there was a lot of like dumb questions, like, aren't they animals, or like, aren't they like, Arthur's a kid show? Can they address? Is this allowed? Are they allowed? Have they done this before? One is Arthur black? I don't like that he's black. What is Buster's? Buster's clearly white, and there was a lot of like, you know about the knitter meme, right? I like the meme, but I didn't know if I could like those specific tweets because it felt like a little bit like, it's not the point here. Like, but I hear you. So, you know, a lot of my time spent with the tweet was like going back, checking people, like, hey, Arthur's always had race. Here's some examples, and then other people would be like, no, that's stupid. They literally have ears and noses and all this other stuff. And it's like, no, dummy. They've had Binky's adopted sister. They have always had geographical differences. They've always had racial disparities. Yeah. You have characters that are black and Jewish and Chinese and Ecuadorian. Like, these have been here literally since the show's been around. And I think part of it is because Arthur is like such a ethereal thing, like, it hangs in the background, like, people come back to it every once in a while, but they don't necessarily like keep tabs on it because it's just so old. But it's also like, this stuff has been here since you've been watching it. Like, where have you been?
Exactly.
You know, it's wild. Like, there's so much like, oh, they're animals though, right? Who's the black one? I'm like, they can just let you know. There are no. It's kind of, it's a little racist to assume that there are black ones, right? If they're black, they'll tell you.
And it seems to be like a very pedantic and frankly exhausting argument to be like, well, actually they're all animals, so there is no race. Which, of course, like you said, Arthur's been dealing with issues related to race or just having racial aspects to their characters forever. And also, in this situation, where we're dealing with something that, from a kid's perspective, can be an issue that can be very confusing and scary. Like, it's okay to step out of the exact reality of the show to show kids where you stand and give them something reassuring and give them a bit of a call to action. At least that's how I feel. You know, it's not like, when did this conversation take place in the canon? I don't believe. Like, shut up. It's not what this is about. Like, that's just what it feels like to me sometimes.
Yeah, it's funny because the reason why the reason why this hit was not only like Cash sent it to me, not only because it's like Arthur content, but because our friend made a video. That's kind of, this is a PG podcast. It's hard to explain without showing the video, but basically it had to do with like race, and Arthur characters were suggested for the list, and, you know, and part of his ruling was that the Arthur animals are animals, so they wouldn't have racial slurs or like disparities, like they're not black. They can't say X, Y, and Z. And so, like, I spent when I found out about this, I just like, hey, hey, look at this. I told you from the start they had races. Get over. And he still won't accept it to this day. But when I posted it to Twitter, I did not expect so many people to agree with him, and I was just like, okay, I've had enough. I can't be part of this anymore.
I do think that it, despite all the kind of quote unquote trouble that it's courted, I still think this was a really important leap to take. And of course, in doing so, it's bound to ruffle the feathers of like the least likable people that you're to run across on the internet. Like, in terms of the way the message came across, do you guys feel like it communicated itself well? Like, do you think this was a good message for Arthur to share?
I think it was, honestly. This is something that I had talked about with Deli, like, you know, when this video is like still fresh, but before we made our video, if I recall correctly. But honestly, this just like reminded me of not just like solely like shows in general addressing these topics, but the strength of like Arthur in itself addressed these topics. And I know because of the circumstances, you know, this is probably like the best we could get. And I think like a YouTube short would probably get more into people's like conscience, like, you know, better than a traditional episode. But now I'm like genuinely intrigued as to like how they would handle a plot like this in the 11-minute structure. And I really do think they would have the strength for it, but I don't know, maybe it's something they could address in the future.
That is something that people did bring up too. This is inappropriate for a 3-minute short. Why not just make it an 11-minute episode? Which I think is fair. I'm the Arthur Lore consultant now, I guess, but I'm not fully read. You know, I dip in and out of seasons. I
can help you with as much as I can. There's plenty of things I don't know about, but hopefully I can kind of lift you up with my own knowledge too. So
great. It would be hard for me to imagine that they haven't tackled this before. Like, in general, like, not even just, like, racism of this sort, but, like, bigotry, discrimination. The John Lewis episode of Arthur was pretty much that, but without the racial context. So, and even if they haven't tackled that before, the whole gist of Arthur is just, you know, to celebrate diverse cultures and people. And I remember hearing you talk about it in one episode, and how like the whole mantra of Arthur is just it's encapsulated in that theme song, right? You know, just getting to know people and hearing people out, and it's a message that resonates. So I don't understand, you know, this wouldn't, even if Arthur didn't explicitly say this, like if the short never existed, it's not a message that they would reject. And I don't think any PBS show would, like, you know, I don't think the Dinosaur Train crew are fans of Steven Crowder or whatever. But I mean, you know, did you need this short to like illuminate that? You know, it's weird.
Yeah, and it kind of goes along with like, well, this was intended for an audience that is, in some cases, just finding out about this because of the events of 2020. That also, and because it's so concurrent with everything that's been happening in terms of the Black Lives Matter protests and everything else that's been happening, I thought it was kind of important to note that, Cash, you mentioned that, you know, it being in this kind of video format, this 3-minute video, it's more likely to kind of catch on with people who aren't going to sit down to watch an entire episode. I looked it up. So there was also that viral clip from that episode of Sesame Street a couple of months ago about the protests, about the Black Lives Matter protests. They don't actually have an official upload of that on like Sesame Street's YouTube or whatever it is, but there are clips of it uploaded onto YouTube, at least as far as I could see. And I was curious, and it's true that that clip as well also has a very healthy dislike portion of the viewing audience that are looking at that. Even though when I saw that myself a couple months ago, again, I was practically moved to tears because I thought it was such a... personally, I thought it was a really great way to tackle such a heady and sensitive issue for an audience that's even younger than Arthur's. So
in a way that almost made me feel a little bit better about this short's reception, because it's like, oh, okay, no matter how you package this, there is still going to be that crowd of people who will have the same problems with it. And like you said a couple times, Deli, like are you sure? Like why are you talking about this children's show? And it's like, well, when do we start? Like when would be for some people a good time to start would be never. So it's like we gotta do this at some point.
Right.
And especially in like Sesame Street's case, like I feel like people who disagree with that, they really just have their head like way up there, because Sesame Street literally head on addressed the issue of racism in a traditional episode. Obviously it came out, before my time, but it still hits those beats. It's still very much relevant if you put it on now, because those issues are still gonna happen. So I don't know. If that's the case, people really do just want to like pretend that because these issues systemically or otherwise don't affect them or their kids, they can just like live in a little bubble, just pretend that everything's all hunky-dory, and they want their entertainment to cater to that. But this is the real world, and I think showing that even in these little animated or puppetry utopias, that real world issues do still happen is important. We don't want to like take away childhood innocence and just make them cynical, but we need to. It would be the most responsible thing to show, realistically, like there are bad things in the world, and knowing about them and being aware of it, and like how even for a little bit, just being aware as how you can help make a difference would still not only empower viewers of any show that would tackle sensitive issues, but still maintain that childhood innocence and optimism. Because I think that's also a very important aspect, especially for our child viewers.
So those were kind of the notes that I had, but before we kind of start wrapping up here, I just wanted to ask, of course, I would again encourage everybody to check out Deli, your most recent video on The Wacky Deli on YouTube. But is there anything else that you guys wanted to say about this while we're still on the topic?
I think all I could really say is that, we need to do this more. I think it's a point I hit on in the original video, but I mean, hey, man, you gotta normalize anti-racism. Mm-hmm. I think that's the key over here, and I mean, it's always going to make certain people uncomfortable, and not everyone's going to embrace it. That's all right, but if we can just get to a point where all the states will allow a gay rat wedding to air on public television, then I'm straight. That's all I could ask for.
I agree.
And, of course, I definitely agree, too. We are definitely living in an age where, in general, just like topics addressing different ways of life, especially lately with LGBT stuff and representation animation, I think we're definitely making progress. But not only do the shows themselves are always on that upward incline towards progress, we need to directly find a way to reach towards audiences and, by whatever means necessary, make them more willing to listen and to be aware of these messages that, we're spreading. Multiple shows can address these messages in whatever way that they feel is appropriate. And, sometimes, the message might not hit. Like, again, people have said that, a full-length episode on racism probably would have been better. But if we have more shows and more people talking about these messages, we probably wouldn't have to hold, when it does happen, on a pedestal. I feel like we can't expect everything to hit on every beat possible, but with more messages, more shows available, we can hone on specific aspects while still tying into the whole anti-racism, anti-bigotry message. And of course, this isn't to say that kids can't still be kids. Of course, we're still going to have our wacky fun times on whatever show that decides to discuss these issues, but again, just keeping them informed of the real world and maintaining the optimism while still keeping them grounded is ultimately what I think should be the end goal.
Well, guys, I'm really happy that I was able to connect with you about this, and I've mentioned it a couple of times here, but I wanted to give you guys the chance to talk about your own online presences. So, Deli, we'll start with you, and this is kind of where it all came from, is your YouTube channel. So, could you tell us where we can find you online, what kind of stuff you like to create, and that sort of thing?
Sure. Well, the YouTube channel is just, The Wacky Deli. If you pop that into YouTube, you'll probably find it. I'm also on Twitter under a similar handle. And, I'm pretty multifaceted. I kind of just cover what I want, anything. Things like the Arthur piece are kind of based on spontaneous news, but, I try to do deep dives and analyses and retrospectives and stuff. In fact, a few of my friends and I are working on a collab series about aspects of Phineas and Ferb. So if you want to check out my channel, you can probably find the rest of theirs over there. And I just kind of do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, you've got a video on the gay rat wedding. I mean, I'm pleased because as somebody who grew up in Canada, I'm seeing like some faces from my past here. We got Sticking Around. We got Ned's Newt. Man, I can't wait to like take a deep dive. You've even got like a month about the National Film Board. So I'm super glad to have found your channel, not just for this conversation, but this is gonna keep me afloat for a while. And Cash, tell us about where you can be found online. I'm just looking at some of the stuff on your YouTube channel right now as well.
Okay, so you can find me of course, on YouTube, Cash, and on Twitter, Cash, KASH_CASH, and of course the art account, but that's my bio. As for my content, I guess you could really describe it as potpourri. I definitely, for the sake of argument, I would align myself with the quote-unquote YouTube cartoon community. In fact, quite similar to the retrospective collab that Deli is currently a part of, I was, 2 months ago, I was in a collaborative review of the Cartoon Network Invaded event with some bigger channels. But as for the content that I produce, I really just want to talk about like literally anything. Like this channel is just an excuse to talk about like any piece of media that I resonate with, be it animation, be it live action, maybe even a game or anime or whatever. And I think the proudest videos that I have are my first Anonymous Nobody, which is a sort of tribute to Ian Jones-Cordy as a black artist, and my recent video, which is a musical analysis on the music that was used in Clone High. But I have a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline. A lot of it's going to be surprising, and I may not post often, but what I do post, I'm very proud of.
And as something that might happen in the pretty near future, Cash and I, when we were talking about the vid, since we realized that there were so many people that weren't in the know about Arthur, we figured that we would want to make a video about diverse topics in Arthur, about race or, mental illness and other things that have been addressed in the world of Arthur. So we want to address that within the next couple months or so. So that might be of interest.
Definitely. Please keep me on top of that, and I can offer any help or promotion as best I can. That'd be
wonderful.
I'd be
Thank
happy
you.
to.
Definitely.
And guys, it's been my pleasure to host you both here for this. Thank you very much for your thoughts, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
Thank you.
Definitely. Sign me up, man.
All right. Well, for Deli and for Cash, my name's Will Young. That's another episode of ECL Presents. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you have a good week. And, be good.
I was going to try and think of something important to say, but I couldn't think of anything.